The first topic that we are going to be looking at are functions. Now we perform multiple types of functions in our lives, like the function of a father, a mother, a friend, a brother, etc. If we think about it, we have already come across a couple of functions. These functions were called built-in functions, like the len function right over here, or the input function, the int function, or the bool function. Now these functions are called built-in functions because these functions are coming built in Python. We don't really have to create these functions. We can just directly use them without having to write the functionality of the functions. That's why they are called built-in functions. So let's say we want to greet somebody. So I will say print, hey, how are you doing? And then we might say, how is your day going? And finally we might ask, how is work going? So these are 3 lines and we can print these out. As you can see, it will print all of them out in the console. But let's say we want to greet 10 people. So we will have to use this function 10 more times like this. As you can see, we would have to print this out 10 times. And if I run it, as you can see, it printed out these 3 lines 10 times. Now you might have noticed that this took a lot of lines, 39 to be exact. And I did leave one space between each of them so we know what's going on. But still 39 seems a lot of lines for a repetitive task like printing out these 3 lines over and over again 10 times. The job of a function is to store a piece of code inside it, and then we can call that function whenever we want and it will execute that piece of code. So it might sound confusing. Let's look at how we can do it. So I will comment these lines out and below this I will create a function. To create a function you have to use the def keyword. This is just the short form for define. It just means that we are going to be defining a function and I will name the function greet. Then what you have to do is you need to have an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. Just like how when you are trying to print out something using the print function, you have an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. In here, when we are trying to create a function, we have to use them as well. Then colons, and then after that, notice that we have to indent whatever the code that we want to put inside our function one level more than the function. Meaning if the function was not indented at all, then the code inside it has to be indented by one level. Now what I will do is I will just copy these 3 lines and I will uncomment them like so. Now if I run my code, as you can see, nothing happens. That's because we have to call the function for it to execute these 3 lines. So we can call a function by just using its name, greet, and then having an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. That's it. Now if I run the code, as you can see, it printed out each of these 3 lines right over here. But now what we can do is every time we want to perform this task, we can just call the function instead of writing these 3 lines of code. So we can call the greet function again and it will just print out all of those lines 2 times like so. So let's look at what's happening in detail. First, when I'm calling the function greet, it is going to check is this greet function defined anywhere in the code. It will see that we have a greet function right over here. Then our program will go inside the greet function and then look at these 3 lines of code. And one by one, it will execute each line. So first we are telling it to print, hey, how are you doing? So it will print this out. Then it will come down and then it will print out, how is your day going? Then it will print out, how is work going? And then what it will do is it will exit out of the function. Now if we want to perform the same task that we had to perform, which was printing this out 10 times, we can use a for loop and then we can use a range of 10. So when I provide 10, it just means a range from 0 to 10. And if we go from 0 to 10, it will actually go 10 times instead of 9. Why? Because the first one will be 0 instead of 1. If we use from 1 to 10, then it will only go till 9. But in here, we are going to be using 10, which just means from 0 to 10. And then we can just call our greet function. Now I will remove these lines, and if I run the code, as you can see, it performed the same task, but in here it took us around 6 lines. So to define a function, we first have to use the def keyword, then the name of the function, which is in this case my function. Then we can just give it instructions like do this, then do this, and finally do this. And to call the function, all we have to do is we have to write the name followed by an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis. Now we are actually going to be using something similar to Carol the robot. This is Reeborg's world, and in here this is just a world filled with hurdles, mazes and other challenges which you can perform. So we are going to be using this, and at the end of the section we'll look at how we can solve the maze. So let's say you have a robot, and the job of this robot is to go from your home to the shop and buy some milk. So you can just tell the robot to get out of the house and then go get some milk from the shop and then come back. That will not work because the robot is not a human. So you have to give it instructions like leave the house and then move 2 blocks, then move 2 blocks forward and then get the milk from the shop, then move down 2 blocks and then move left 2 blocks and finally give the milk. Now the sole purpose of this robot is to get you milk, and if you have to write this code over and over again each day, then it is going to be an extreme pain. So instead of that, what we can do is we can use functions. You can think of it as a box like this, and inside that we store all of the code and then we encase it and name it get milk. Now each time we want our robot to get milk, we just call this function and the robot performs all of those tasks on its own without you having to write all of the code over and over again. So if you search in Google Reeborg's world, you will come across the main page. And in here, if you just click on it, and as you can see, this is what you get. So we have our robot Reeborg, and this is just an empty world for you to play around. So what you can do is there are a couple of tabs which you can use. For example, Reeborg's keyboard, which tells you a few commands that you can use like move, turn left, take, put, toss, so on and so forth. So let's try the move one. I will move the character, which is this one. You can also change it to anything you like this, but I will keep it the same. And in here, if I hit this run button, it will just execute my code. As you can see, the move just made the robot move 1 step forward, and then when you click at this, it will just reset everything. So if I use the move function 2 times, then what it's going to do is if I run it, as you can see, the robot moved 2 steps. Now instead of running it, you can also use this button, which is going to just execute each of the lines of code when you click on it. So it executes the first line, then the second line, and then the program finishes. Now it's time for a challenge. I want to move the robot to right over here at the position 4 and 4. And to perform this, I recommend that you check out the Reeborg's keyboard and look at these functions right over here, and you have to use one of these functions to perform this challenge. Okay, so let's walk through it. First, to get to here, we first have to get our robot to right over here, meaning 1, 4. So to get there, we just have to move the robot forward 3 times. Since it's 3 squares, so we'll move it 3 times. We have already moved it 2 times. This is going to be the 3rd time. And I will move step by step. So as you can see, it moved right over here and the program stopped. Now we need to find a way to turn the direction of our robot to left. And if we check the Reeborg's keyboard, we can see that they have a built-in function for that called turn left. And that's exactly what we are looking for. So in here we will use the turn left function, and now if I run the code, as you can see it moves 3 blocks and then after that it turns left. Now all we have to do is we have to move it 3 more blocks and we will be at our final destination. So we are going to be using the move function 3 more times, and if I run the code now, as you can see it moves 3 times, then it turns left, and then it moves 3 times again. Now what I want you to do is I want you to find a way using which we can turn it around, meaning if it's facing forward it should face backwards. So pause the video and try to figure it out. So to do that, all we have to do is we have to make the character turn left 2 times. So I will remove these lines of code, and then if I use the turn left function 2 times, as you can see the robot turned around. Now each time when we want to turn the robot around, we would have to type turn left again and then again and so on and so forth. So instead of that, we are going to be creating our own function called turn around, and inside that we will indent these 2 lines by just selecting them and then pressing tab. And as you can see now, if I use the turn around function which we created, now if I run the code, it does the same thing. But this time if I want to turn the robot around again, I don't have to write turn left 2 times again. I can just use the turn around function that we created and it will do that again, as you can see, like so. Now what I want you to do is I want you to make the robot go here, then here, then here, and then come back to the starting square. So it should look something like this. As you can see, it goes up, then it turns right again, comes down, and then turns right again, and then moves. So pause the video and complete this challenge. So let's do it. So first what we will do is we will just turn the robot to the left direction and then move. So as you can see, this happens. The robot turns left and then moves. Now we have to find a way to turn the robot right, and if we check the Reeborg's keyboard, they don't have a function to turn the robot to the right side. So we have to create our own function to do that. And the simplest way to describe turning right is just turning left 3 times. That is going to make the character turn right. So what we can do is we can create a function and we can rename it to turn right, and in here we can just make our character turn left 3 times, like so. And now below here, if I call the turn right function and then I move forward, as you can see this happens. It moves left, then it moves. After that it goes inside the turn right function, then it executes the line inside the turn right function. So it has to turn left, then turn left again, and finally turn left one more time. And as you can see, it has changed its direction to right, and now it will just move one step like this. And now what we just have to do is we have to make the program turn right again, so it will face this position, and then we will make it move again. It will reach right over here. So now if I run the code, as you can see, it turns right, moves like so. Now finally we just have to make it turn right again, like so. So it's facing this direction. If it turns right, it should face this direction. And finally we will just move it right there. So if I run the code, as you can see, it completely finished the square that we were trying to create.